Mr. Garza? Hello. We're gonna call you Pete. Hi. You're John, have a good Thanksgiving. Yeah, have a great Thanksgiving. Not long ago. Yeah.
It's not good. Why say don't become a couple?
Everybody ready? All right. Call the meeting of the East Central Independent School District Board of Trustees at 5:30 on December 3rd, 2020. Madam Secretary, President, Vice President, can I have a roll call, please?
Sure. Dick Garza.
Here.
Coach.
Here.
Steve Bryant.
Here.
Monique Garces here. John Massengill.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum. Oh, no, hi, Jill. Are you here? She's here. She's waving. All right. Okay, Mr. President, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Monique, move on to prayer and pledge. Sean, who we have?
Yes, sir. We have Ms. Colas, who's going to provide prayer and pledge this evening for us.
If you'll please stand up and bow your head. Prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for the leaders gathered here tonight to make decisions for our district. Lord, we pray that you will guide us in our planning and help us to always keep the focus on what's best for students. We ask that you bless us with the joy of serving our community and with grace on the toughest days. We ask that you will bless this food and see us all home safely tonight. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a short break for everybody to get their food, and then we'll come back and we'll get busy. All right,
Take your precious gift. I like that.
from Board Docs with us this evening to provide the board with a webinar on using that software for managing our board meeting documents. So hopefully you all have your devices with you this evening, as they will walk us all through utilizing a new resource to access our documents. Is that the link right there?
Hi, Margaret.
Hi. Oh, good to see you. You can let them know it's.
Are we ready to start?
Yes, we're ready to start.
Great, good. So, good evening. I'll take as little of your time as possible because I know how much time is devoted to your board meetings. It's a huge amount of time you give to the students there in East Central. So, this is your URL that you see on the screen for your Community by Diligence site. So, to get to it, I'm going to copy that. You will eventually have it bookmarked. I'm sure Sam will take care of that. And when I do that, and I'm just using Chrome, this is your home page, landing page, whatever you want to call it. This is customizable. Margaret's going to eventually put some text in here. She can change the pictures, whatever she wants to do with it. Scrolling down the screen a little bit, on the left-hand side here, welcome message. The search would allow you to search your agendas. The subscription is where members of the public can sign up to be notified when an agenda is ready for them to see. Coming back up here to the top, home, obviously that's where we are. Calendar would give you a larger version of this calendar. The meetings would take you to your meetings list. And the search would do the same thing as the search field down here. Over here on the right-hand side, a smaller calendar, today's meeting, any day that has a meeting on it will be highlighted in gray here. This is today's meeting, and right below it you see today's meetings, this one. There is an upcoming meeting on the 15th that's going to happen, but Margaret has not finished that agenda for it yet. She'll make it available to the public. You notice the difference between these? This one is underlined, this one is not. This is one that the public could see. And right now I am looking at the public site. Recent meetings, these are ones that Margaret and I have been playing with in the past. We can delete those at a certain point in time, Margaret, whenever you're ready to do that. So they would no longer be visible. So for you to log in, you would click on sign in up here at the top, and it will bring up login page. Now I'm going to log in as myself. And then this is what you would do to get in. Now I know that in looking at the back end of your site, there are some, I don't know if any of you have created your passwords yet or not, but I know that some of you have not. I did not go in and check because I can't see them. Nobody can see your passwords once they're out there and created. But Margaret can show you how to do that, or here you would simply, instead of clicking on sign in and entering a password, you would click on forget your password. The system then would send you an email at the address that Margaret supplied to us, and then that would walk you through the process of setting a password. Once you do that, you would come back out here, enter your password in, and that would be your password. It's yours. You can change it, of course, by going back in here and making that change. So I'm just going to click on sign in here, and
Excuse me, can you stop for 1
Sure.
second so that they can log in?
oh yes, please, I would be happy to, sorry.
They need to know.
So you need to.
Sure, not a problem.
Okay, so we need to get to the link. You okay, Dale?
We need to get to the link again. Is it
Oh,
in
sure,
there?
certainly.
So you don't have the link.
Right there.
I'm not. Yes.
I would imagine you could Okay, so now we should go, so put J, Mulkey. Once you get to the sign it
I have
page,
to
put
use
your
my
first
email address, do
initial,
you?
last
I
name.
did, yeah, they, like, it's,
Once you've
they
done that,
originally said use
go to
Stella.
forgot your password.
That's my username, but it's not my
It's
name.
gonna ask you which email address
You
you
use your
want
email
to send you information about resetting.
Now,
Email that we have
said
listed
actual
below.
is not your log.
Oh, that's all.
Right there, user history.
So the same for you?
It's going to need to be your school,
So technology savvy.
ECISD,
Email in there. District email in there. And email you set up your own.
first initial, last name.
Yes.
Is it all lowercase then?
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
And then the password, don't you say forgot
Forgot
password?
password.
And then put your district email address. And send you information, set it.
You just should, if you should keys, you know, I will.
Still working on new tech. You got the technology, not new tech. Hey, one thing at a time.
That instruction.
I know Sandy and email. You can set your password.
So stressful.
You gotta go to your district email.
Well, it's got another slide all over. So once you put that in, if you go to your email, they'll send you an email.
Yeah.
Dennis, the email goes right there, right?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Did it show up yet, Mr. Walker?
I did what he said, but I ain't, you know,
Yeah, we did this while ago, and the email wouldn't show up.
We may have an issue with Mr. Mulkey's email address in the system.
What's his first name?
James, it should be james.mulkey@ecisd.net.
JAMES.MULKEY@ECISD.net.
Correct.
That's what the
That is what
system.
you okay.
That's what we had.
They haven't sent me anything.
Okay, let's check your spam.
Okay, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Very good.
Check your spam.
And there might be some issues, I'm sure Sam knows, you probably posted it coming in.
Yeah. You can. Well, I just.
I'll let Dennis know.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Mr. Mulkey is not getting the
I'll get
Is that everyone else?
No, we're not. Okay, all right, okay, Mr. Matthew just got in, so maybe you guys take a little bit longer.
You might get right.
Thank you very much. Those are kind words coming from you.
Well, Mr. Matthew just got here, so it's probably, yeah, we'll wait for this one.
It might take a couple minutes.
You look like you keep up good that turn.
They have to be on that, that's you first, and then you cut out.
Ms. Dell?
Oh, she's good.
I think she went over, well, this is working? She was working. No, no, I'm sure, I'm using the Chromebook, so she's.
Mr. Brazil, did yours work?
Okay. Look at all mail, you may want to refresh and then check all mail. Refresh and check all mail.
Well, maybe we said that. Yeah.
You'll set your password and then you go back.
And remember to write the password down somewhere safe.
Yeah. You can always change it again, but still. But you need your old password to get it first.
Okay,
Okay,
I think we're ready.
okay, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, great, good. Okay, I will move that off. So should I go back to the screen to where I was before? Would that be helpful?
Yes.
I'll do that, great, okay. So, well, I remember that I wasn't there. So I'm going to, over here on the left-hand side, these couple of icons can be opened up with these three bars. This is your meetings tab, which is what we're on. This is your public site. Normally, like before, when I first logged in, and you might be at this point, you came to this screen. And this is where I was saying, these are pictures that Margaret can change. She can put in some text in here, or whatever she might want to put out there, your mission statement, vision statement, whatever you choose. A little bit further down here, again, she can put in some additional information about your meetings. Search could be done here. You would search your agendas. The subscribe here, that's where public members could go in to ask the system to send them an email when Margaret has an agenda ready for the public to see. Coming back up here, these are kind of a repetition of these, but they're still up in the top page. Search does the same thing, it's just higher up. Meetings, your meetings are listed over here. Now your calendar right here identifies, as I said before, anything in gray here is going to be a date that there is a meeting. When the days, if you click on the 3rd, you would bring up the meeting. The 15th meeting, as you can see, is an upcoming meeting. It's not ready yet. That's why it's not underlined as you see this one. If I click on the calendar over here, it's going to bring it up much larger. And you can see it here as to where the address is, what time the meeting is, that kind of thing, in more detail. So what you can do, you can click on the meetings here, or you can click on the meetings here, or you can click on the meeting up here, whichever you choose. I'm going to click right here. And that's going to bring up your agenda. Now, this is an agenda that you can make use of. This gives you the ability here to print an agenda if you want. The agenda by itself. If I click on that, I'm going to get just the agenda, no attachment. But if I go back to that and click on agenda packet, then there's the agenda, but then the attachments follow that agenda. We come back up here again, and we're going to go to this real meeting. That you you can get there any way you want to, either way you want. So to look at the agenda, You can follow those tools. You can click on it here also. Special Board of Trustees meeting. And it's going to still take you to the same place. So there's different ways to get there. But you see right here, there's a members tab. I'm going to click on that because you are members of the board. And that's going to give you a list of the members of the board, so your public can see who they are, and what committees, what board, what groups you're in. Because within community, you can be on the board of trustees, you can be on different subcommittees, and they can all have different agendas structured in here. So coming back up to here, you could also come way up here to the top to my meetings. And when you click on that, you come in here to upcoming and previous. And now this is considered previous meeting right here. So now we have the agenda up here. So this is where you might come before the meeting, after Margaret has the agenda ready for you. And here's the agenda on the right-hand side. It's kind of like a simple agenda over here. All the verbiage is not there, but that's why you have both screens. Well, you see over here, this is the icon, the outline format. You want to change it, you can. You can change it to this format, which is a smaller, so you could print it if you wanted to. I'm going to come back to this format because this allows you to jump down the agenda very quickly if you want to. Now over here on the right-hand side is the name of your agenda, obviously, and the information about it. Here, when you look at the agenda, you wanted to look at the attachment, which is right there below the agenda item. You simply click on it, and the attachment comes up. You can go back to the agenda itself. And look at whatever other items you want. That's why I always keep up the separate panel here. It's easier for me. But let's say that you come down, and again, these are all the different types of things that you typically see in an agenda. Most of the time, board members don't have anything to talk about with here. But when they come down to something like a topic, and I put this in here ahead of time, this is an annotation that you could do. And you would see it then when you get into your meeting. So how do you make that? Let's say you looked at an attachment here, more than just this one, and you read that and you wanted to make a comment about it. Up here, you have the ability, you see it says freehand tools. You can click on it. You can pick different colors of pens. I'm going to click on green, and I'm going to say, I want to talk about this. And if that's all you want to do, as an annotation for you, that's fine. If you wanted to highlight this, you could click on the second tab, and I'm going to highlight that in this color. And this is a different tool for you to make use of. But the one I like the most is this one right here. So when I click on it, I'm going to put a comment tab right here. When I do that, wherever I click, it's going to open up over here my ability to type in a comment. What's the question I might want to ask at the board meeting? That's what this is for. So you might be saying here something like not knowing what this is, who did this study? Now these are your notes. Nobody sees them but you. They're not something you share with anybody else. When you save it, it's there, and that's just like this one. So that's what this other piece here is for, is that you see this changed over here. So if I'm over here in the agenda, and I want to see my annotations, I can click on the annotation button, and I see all of them. So this is the one down here. One-time payment. There would be my comment. And I could add another comment, or a second, or a third, or a fourth comment, however many I wanted to do. It's all there for me to make a note ahead of time, so that when I get into the meeting and I open up the agenda, I can click on the individual attachment. You notice it changes to which one opens up over here on the left-hand side. So you can make one or multiple attachments. You can add on to different items here. You see all the annotations are noted here. So it's an easy process for you to make a note on your agenda so that you can ask a question during the meeting. Now, I know this is a very short agenda compared to most of them for you, but this is a special meeting of the board, so it's not typically going to be a longer meeting. Other things that you can see here, the search feature, you could search. So if we wanted to, someplace in the agenda was, let's say, a phrase. I know that there's a 25% error. There's something I want to find. I could click on this, and I delete the text that I already had in there, and I would just type in what I want to look for. I want to look for participants. And you see, as soon as I get enough information in there, it's highlighting over here already for it. So I can find it easily in my agenda, because agendas tend to be very long. Closing that up, the vertical ellipsis here will let you go to full screen if you want. You click on it, it goes to a full screen for you. Everything stays the same, the side panel's still there, it's just a lot larger. Here you could download it, and here you could print it. So it does the same thing that I mentioned before about what you can do in terms of printing. You can print all the pages. You can print just the current page. You can select numbers of pages. You can include your comments. So if I want to print this out just to carry it with me to the meeting, I could do that. I could just put a check mark right here inside of the include comments. And then when I click on print, I get the agenda itself, followed by the comments that I have. So you can do that and then obviously print it out for yourself if you wanted to. I close that and I'm back to the agenda. So it's a very simple, straightforward process for you. Now, I know these attachments are just the simple ones like this, but that your attachments can be multiples. There is no limit to the number of attachments that can be added, and there's no limit to the sizes of the attachments. So as Margaret moves farther into different types of meetings for you, she can attach the complete bill list, all the warrants. She can attach the check roll for the month, whatever she chooses to attach to show you as board members. So it's all contained here for you, just like in your previous system. So, that's really as simple as it is. That's what you do in looking at the agenda. You can make a tag and then make notes on it. It's there for you. Going back to that home page, which is what the home would come to. There are none, but you can go to previous meetings and you can see the one we have there, which is the current one we have today. And up here, this little question mark, there's a help. So when you click on the help, you're going to get the member's guide, which is what Margaret, I think, gave to you already, or if not, she will be giving it to you shortly. So I'll walk you right through whatever it is that you're looking for. And again, it is printable. You can do it, you can download it. So it's all there for you to make use of. Closing that back up. With the tab up here at the top, which is where it opened, I'm back in the meetings. Again, remember this little icon right here takes you to the public site, which is, I'm logged in here already, but still if I wanted to go to the public site, I could by clicking public site, my meetings, and the help. That's what you would do as a board member. Now, obviously, I know this is a very short meeting, not much there, but that's what this meeting's about. Are there any questions? Marty will answer all of them.
username, passwords, get your password reset, get in there and explore. We can help you do that if you're having any issues tonight, we'll get you set up. For tonight, if you can't access electronically, the packet is in your miscellaneous folder to follow along. Any questions? Tell them.
The hardest, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The hardest part is getting logged in the first time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy it, and to the board members, I worked for a school district for 37 years. Thank you for what you do for kids there in Texas. It's so important that people are willing to give their time and their energies, because I know it's not an easy job to be a board member, but thank you for doing that for the kids.
Thank you.
Talk to you again, Margaret,
Yeah.
or I'll be sending you an email tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, well, I appreciate everybody's patience while we're learning to do some new software. Let's move on to item 6, superintendent's report, Mr. Piscano.
Yes, sir, Mr. President, trustees, we'll be bringing to you tonight the final report from PASA regarding the latest demographic study of the developments, residential and like in the East Central School District. But prior to that, all may have noticed we have a county commissioner from precinct 4, Tommy Calvert, with us this evening. He asked for a few minutes to brief the board. Mr. Calvert?
Thank you very much. Are you still here?
Sure.
All right, to be here.
Whatever's comfortable for you.
First of all, I want to thank you all for your service on this board in this trying time, in this very difficult time of COVID-19. Thank you for coming through for our kids. I'm going to do as my father taught me. I'm going to be good, be brief, and be gone. Let me just say, at 30,000 foot in the air level, if you have a friend in the Commissioner's Court with respect to education, I'm a former preschool teacher myself in inner city Austin, and my mother is the head of the business department and a whole bunch of other departments at San Antonio College. I sat on the board of trustees of my college alma mater, and have a lot of things that we can talk about at other times related to education, where I believe the county can be greater help to you. We have done some things in this crisis that you may be aware of. I led the court in putting $2 million towards testing for children and faculty, and if you're wanting to participate in that program, it is open to you. And of course, we did some things that make technology more available for students through pads, the mobile hotspots, all those kinds of things for technology. And hopefully, if there's other challenges that come before you, we'll be able to continue to help as we face these unforeseen challenges. Today, I wanted to give you a kind of a bird's eye view of how I see things in terms of development. I'm so excited about this report because you're going to take me to school today. I'm going to learn. We've passed along a lot of data to your consultant. And I want to ask Aaron from my staff if he'll hand out what I'm about to give you. We've got a couple of things that we've handed over. There's a lot more that we've given over that you don't need to go through. But, you know, when I was elected, I sat down with you, former Chairman Bryant, down on 87, and we talked about East Central, and we talked about development. And what you asked me to do in that meeting, you said, we want more development going on in East Central. And so we got to work. And I've always loved the fact that when I crossed 410 along Houston Street, I entered the country, if you will. And I love the farmlands and the country of East Central, always have been partial to it. But things are changing. If you look at Bexar County, in the next 15 years, 1.5 million people are moving into Bexar County, maybe even more. As we see some states like California really collapsing in a lot of ways, they're having a tough time. There's all kinds of folks that are moving here, but at least 1.5 million in the next 15 years are moving to Bexar County. And if you divide the county into hemispheres, between the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere, the last 50 years have belonged to the Western Hemisphere, and the next 50 years belong to the East. That's why we're expanding 1604, That's why we're expanding I-10. That's why we're expanding 35. All of these roads are beginning to expand. It's why I'm trying to get ahead and trying to make sure our area isn't winds up like Soma, quite frankly, where you have congestion and, out by 151 and all those areas where they didn't have the leadership to plan ahead for infrastructure and create enough secondary roads that lead to major highways and things of that nature. So you look at Elmendorf, for example. I created a tax increment refinance zone in Elmendorf. You all have been surprised about how much is happening in the southeast. It's not by accident. It's by hard work, and it's about planning. And so in that regard, Elmendorf is going to increase in size by about 4 times its current population. I was wearing my ECISD 10 mask here. ECISD 10 services the Elmendorf area. We just opened a new fire station down there. Through early on in my term, I talked with the fire leadership of all the ESDs, and I said, the city of San Antonio may annex some of you, and you're going to be zeroed out in revenue. Yet we have growth coming, and we've got to get ahead of this and have better services, more response time, better response time for the people. Some of you need to think about merging, and they did. So ESD 10 went from $35,000 a year budget to $3 million a year budget. And that's what allowed them to build a $2.2 million fire station. And there will be more of that. I'm working with our chief in China Grove, Chief Winfield, and creating a new district to enhance fire service in those areas. All of this works hand in hand, but East Central, thank you for doing a great job, because your leadership as a school district is what has led to folks coming and having interest in the area. On the front of this PowerPoint here, it's the biggest PowerPoint I think I've ever seen in my life, but on March the 8th, 2018, I may have been the quarterback for this development summit, but your superintendent, Roland Toscano, was the wide receiver. I may have been the Troy Aikman, but you were the Jerry Rice brother. And he scored a big touchdown at Holt Caterpillar. We had about 70 plus developers in the room talking about development in East Central area. And because of the presentation that your superintendent gave that day, it really put East Central on a map in a way that I'm not sure it has ever been. And the real challenge for someone like me who wants to make sure that things are not just cookie cutter, that they're not just done the way that they have always been done, but ways that we learn from mistakes of other areas, is sometimes the state of Texas doesn't have enough tools in its toolbox for county commissioners to use in terms of zoning. There's it's kind of a wild west in terms of development in unincorporated Bexar County cities. They have more powers than I do. And as a commissioner, I don't always know when all of these developers are coming, because they don't really have to ask me for much permission. It's by state law, it's pretty much a rubber stamp. But what we've tried to do is use communication when we do have those developers come across to us and make them raise the bar of the caliber of what they're trying to do. And to try to let them know really on the ground the great communities that we have, and that we want to keep them great and keep them as high of a caliber as we can. So we've been successful in that regard. I know Gordon Hartman is we created a public infrastructure district at the old Gates property off of 87. There will be new housing there. What I impressed upon Gordon was that I want to make sure that there's enough, 87 will probably become like, I hate to say this, it will probably become like Bandera Road over the next couple of decades. The difference that I want to make is that we have enough infrastructure. What they didn't do on Bandera Road is create public infrastructure districts like I did, which means that we can forward the money in advance to the developer for roads, for water, for sewer, and other infrastructure, so that we have secondary connectors and other major arterials that make sure that we're not spending an hour in congestion like you might do on Bandera Road. So these are things that I am thinking about and trying to put in incentives and finance tools that can help this go a lot better. But at any time that you find that these developments are falling short of what you think that as a community we should have, please come and see me, because we will get in front of those developments and do our best even with the weak state laws, to cajole them into doing the right thing. By and large, we've been pretty successful. So your consultant is going to go through a lot more of the detail. Of course, one of the areas up in the north part, near St. Hedwig, and by the way, it was quite a development when there was more development in St. Hedwig, because, you know, the laws in the city of St. Hedwig with respect to the acreage and all those kinds of things are pretty different. There are larger lots and all those kinds of things, and so there is development. The Mosaic is a development that I was able to do a public infrastructure vision for a master plan development that will create some of that infrastructure again. I think it's probably around $30 million worth of infrastructure, but there will be more. What you have to understand, what we all understand, is that with that 1.5 million people moving in Barrett County, East Central and Precinct 4 in general has the most developable land in all of Barrett County. That's just a fact. And when you look at the metropolitan statistical area in terms of where new housing starts are, you know, the area out northwest has been 40% along that I-10 corridor northwest towards you know, the Lock and Terra Dominion area and over down 10 and towards Lock and all that area. 40% of the growth over the last couple of decades of the county has taken place there. But that's going to change. So you have something like 38% of new housing starts there. You have 32% of new Braunfels coming out of county, and then you have 28% in Precinct 4. But I think Comal County's water challenges, they have a situation where they don't have enough water, really. It's very quietly kept for the population they have today. But when that begins to surface more in the public knowledge, they could get bailed out by the state funds for that. But if they aren't, then you know we are going to be in Precinct 4, the #1 area for a lot of that new development, because we have the most development land in all Barrett County. So in any event, the next 5 years, your area is very hot, very, very hot. And you will see things in the East Central School District in terms of development that have never been seen in the history. Our challenge is to work together to maintain high caliber of schools, high caliber of quality, and to really innovate for the challenges that we will have. And I stand with you to do that. Even at Gordon Hartman's Gates property, I am working on a satellite presence for our constables and justice of the peace office. The JP office has always been there at 410 right at Grigsby. And of course, it's been somewhat of a consternation that we're moving their headquarters eventually to 1604 Rocket Lane, right outside of Randolph Air Force Base. Because I heard the community say we want to continue that presence, we're looking to have that presence in the East Central School District area, the satellite office for our JP courts and our constable's office built along the Gates property there on 87. So just looking at my notes here, Toscano was the best, Toscano was the best. I think I'm done. This is Thank you all. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Morgan, we're going to pass it here this evening. Mind introducing our representatives that will be with us tonight.
Appreciate it.
Today we have Dr. Daisy and Justin Silhady from CASA out of the great College Station, Texas. And so they spent the last couple of months doing a very controversial study, and I know they're excited to share the information tonight with the board. Without any further ado, I'll get started. Welcome, Justin. Thank you for that.
Please do.
Well, I think it's great to have cooperation with your local jurisdiction. I can stress that. I mean, that's something we do as a company. We have to communicate with all of the cities and counties, water districts, you name it. And so I think having that kind of cooperation, like the commissioner said, is a great thing. I wish more school districts could have some more cooperation like that. Believe it or not, some don't. So I just kind of wanted to start with a little overview about our firm, since this is the very first year we've been here, and meeting for the first time. We basically provide demographic studies, population growth studies, enrollment growth, and long-range forecasting for really a lot of the high-growth districts in Texas. 75% of the top 10 growing districts in the state, actually, we work with, and even more. So we work a lot on an annual basis. Districts, think of Katy or Leander and Austin. These districts grow about 2,000 or 3,000 students a year. You're nowhere close to that. We work with others on a semi-annual basis or even longer, and that's probably where you're at. And so we assist them a lot of times in bond planning, many times, every time in some cases. And then tenants boundary zoning and just facility siting when to purchase land. And so that provides us with a consistency in our long-range plan. We can work with a high-growth district every year periodically. We can update all of these changing and dynamic housing developments when they occur, and just kind of keep trekking forward with every economic lift or boom there is. Generally speaking, we always say our plan is pretty stable. It may not happen exactly when we say it because of ups and downs in the economy, but typically where we're kind of pinpointing the need for schools never changes. And so that's where our long-range plan, Stacy will come in later and talk about that, and that's very important for you to have. That'll be very new for you. But basically, this is kind of where we work in general terms in the last, say, 5 years. A lot of the Houston and Austin area, we're really starting to emerge more in Central Texas, especially in San Antonio now. A lot of your growth, just like the commissioner said, was really concentrated in a few school districts. What's happening is it's now spreading out. So it's not just in Northeast or North Side anymore. We're starting to see districts all around here calling us frequently, hey, we need help. We're starting to have our first developments emerge on our boundary. And that's exactly what's happening here. So this is the first project. Unfortunately, it's occurring right at the same time as our friendly pandemic. And that's, unfortunately, for every district, it's a problem right now. And that's with your enrollment. You know you had a decline in enrollment of about 4%. We'll talk about that more as we go throughout this report. But what we had to do, we had to assume that those students are coming back. Of course they are. I mean, it's not necessarily that they left. A lot of them didn't enroll. We saw that at pre-K and kindergarten levels in almost every single school district in the state. Those are the 2 grade levels that essentially lost the most. And so they didn't enroll sometimes. And then of course you had other grade levels that lost as well. Maybe people moving into new homes decided not to enroll in the new district as well. So these are all things we have to consider. But we're assuming that in the next 2 years, the majority of those students lost will come back. Next year, we're assuming a large chunk will, especially if we can get a vaccine now, unless the pandemic really worsens over the winter and spring. We're already starting to see students trickle back into schools. We were just talking with a Houston area school district yesterday. We had a principal's webinar, and we had countless elementary principals telling us, well, every week we're getting 3 or 4 students enrolled, even in October and November. So that's, into November and December, that's very unusual. So that's only because of the pandemic. One thing we'll talk about a lot later on are charter schools. I don't want to go on it right now, but they're affecting your enrollment dramatically. And then, of course, this new housing movement. So we're going to take all of this housing information and put it in terms of enrollment later on in the presentation. But let's start with a brief overview of K-12 in the region. And I want to kind of we share these maps with every district every year. It kind of gets us kids started. What this is showing
is the metro region, and I have East Central here circled. And you are essentially the 9th largest school district in terms of enrollment. Now this is going back to fall 2019, because we don't have TEA data for fall 2020 yet. Of course, everyone dropped this year for the most part. But, you know, the big behemoths to the north, these are large geographic districts as well, to the north and northwest as well. They are, of course, the larger enrollment. But this is my favorite of this series. It's the 5-year enrollment change. So what we're seeing here is year number 10 in the metro area, which it's a small number, just over 300 new students enrolling in the district. Truly, it should be larger than that, and we'll get to that in a minute. But you're still lower on the totem pole compared to districts like Kamal on the north side. They're still gaining over 4,000 every single 5 years. So that 5-year growth kind of shows you a trajectory of where each district is at. Shirts, of course, well, of course, right next to you, they're growing by 1,300 plus every 5 years. So I would put them in a higher growth category already. You guys are just emerging. Real quick, and we have a lot more information inside these large binders in chapter 1 that covers general demographic trends, characteristics, some census data as well. But real quick, I just kind of want to show you a couple of things. Everything on this chart, a lot of the bottom line is you're kind of in the middle of the road in terms of characteristics such as median age. Compare exactly with the San Antonio metro, almost at 33.5. You have almost the exact same percentage of student age population as San Antonio metro, and 20% of your population is student age. Travel time to work, almost exactly like the San Antonio metro area median. Same thing with median household income. Very, very much average. And that's, I think, a good thing. Developers are going to notice that. If they're looking at census maps of where do I want to put down housing, well, this is kind of average right here. It's not lower than average, but it's also not really expensive. It's not really, it's not an outlier per se. And so these are things that developers look at. And then also, we look at, I can't really point to it, but that very bottom line there is, we call it a quality of life indicator, the economically disadvantaged population. So that's a school district percentage that every school district has. And you're at 65%, which is just a little bit above the state average of about 60. So again, kind of middle of the road. And then this next map here shows that economically disadvantaged population percentage for every school district. And of course, we all know that the northern school districts have a lower economically disadvantaged population. But when you look at that south portion of the metro and that line that the commissioner stated, kind of that southwest to northeast line, your district stands out as having more of that middle of the road. You're yellow, you're not orange or red. So, you know, a lot of developers are looking at data saying, oh, well, where could I build where there's a little bit more money per se, where people could actually afford to purchase a home. Your district actually stands out on these sides, having a higher quality of life per se. So that's interesting to me. Moving forward, looking at enrollment, this chart, all this does is show your last 10 to 15 years of enrollment change. For a long time, 2007 to about 2016, you have been gaining quite a few students, 1 to 2%, almost on an annual basis. And it all started to kind of change back in 2017. You really haven't been gaining too much, and then of course this year, it dropped dramatically due to COVID. When you look at all of this growth over the years by grade group, nothing truly stands out. A lot of times you'll see a large increase in enrollment at the elementary level. My belief is you haven't, even with some of your new housing developments, because maybe the charters are taking them away at the exact same time. So that's something interesting. You can see that very last blue bar, that's this year. So that elementary is blue, elementary grade levels are blue. That, of course, was where you had your largest drop, almost like every other single school district in the state. The pre-K, K, grade 1, grade 2, is where we saw those students not enroll or either withdraw because of COVID concerns. So we start every single project looking at that very first grade group, the kindergarten population. And that's what this chart is showing. The orange line are your births. We get that data from the state health department. And we aligned it with the kindergarten enrollment, 5-year, basically looking at that same year of birth. So we essentially adjusted the birth line 5 years to align with the kindergarten enrollment. And what you can see here is that your births were actually lower than your kindergarten, meaning there were more kindergartners enrolling than were born. Usually we see that in higher growth school districts. People move in. But then that started to change around the time you started really having an influx of charter school students. Charter schools moving into the boundary line or San Antonio ISD. And so we started seeing that drop. We started having fewer kindergarten students enrolled about 5 years ago. And now here we are at that dotted line with COVID, where we continue to see an increase in births, which is good. But that blue line there dropped. We anticipate, of course, that will change once people start enrolling back in again. But the takeaway here is after that dotted line, we're continuing to see births increase. And truthfully, they'll increase even more as people move in and have babies in their new homes. They just don't live here yet. Let's talk about those charters. Let's segue into that. The top school districts with charter enrollment here are listed, and they're all shown in red and orange. So what we've done is we've taken transfer data from TEA, and we've mapped it. So, for instance, the district with the highest percentage of students enrolled in public schools that are in charter schools are from Edgewood ISD. San Antonio comes in second. They're all over 15% of their actual residents attending public schools are in charters. You're at just over 10. Now this is last year's data. So you can see the hot spots are really all in Bexar County, and it's affecting, charters are affecting a lot of the districts in the Northwest in greater magnitude today than they were ever before. This next map shows you the 2-year change in charter enrollment. So from fall 2017 to fall 2019. Again, we don't have this year's data yet. The 3 districts that are taking the largest hit from new charters are Northside, Northeast, and San Antonio. That's just where they've been building them. You're going to get the charter enrollment where you build the school. And the west side of Bexar County is really where they've been focusing. Charter schools, based on what we know, have been kind of focusing either out in the suburbs with programmatic, new programs like language programs or STEM programs that will draw in a certain different population than they used to. We all thought of charter schools starting in urban Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. And they were focusing on lower income families. And that's true still to today, but we now have a different type. And so we're still seeing some of those focusing on the lower income families, and a lot of those are of course popping up in San Antonio ISD. And those are also affecting your school district. We had Idea Converse just opened up this year. It's inside your district actually, in Part 10. So you can see here, you only have maybe 125 students enrolled in charters over the last 2 years, from 2017 to 2019. But that number is actually higher this year. We saw Idea Converse open, and we have another Idea school that's continuing to expand. And we also have a charter in Brooks that's been expanding as well. So we actually, with our charter school survey, we contacted the largest ones that are growing or new. We assume this year you actually have closer to 11% of your resident enrollment in charters. So it went up by over 100 to about 150 students just this year with these new systems coming in. What this chart's showing you is the share of your K-12 or your pre-K-12 enrollment and where they go. So like I said, we've contacted charter schools, we've pulled the data from the state. We assume that 11% of your resident enrollment actually attends charters. Almost 1% attends private schools, but that's a little below what normally is attending private schools. This year, private schools lost a lot of enrollment because of COVID. So your normal private school enrollment should be closer to 200 students. And then a lot more students have been attending nearby districts, over 5%. So when you take all of those out of the equation, you're left with East Central having about 83% of the pie, 82.8% of who could actually, that's low, to be honest. Most suburban districts are between about 90 and 94%. But there are some districts that are below 90 because they have either a lot of private schools or a lot of charter schools, taking away students. So I wanted to show you this in graphical form, going back about 6 years. It's a chart. All you really need to focus on is the yellow right now. The yellow is your enrollment. Taking away transfers into ECISD because they don't live here. And it's also, we included what we believe is the COVID loss, the about 400 students who didn't show up this year. That enrollment since 2014 has only really gone up 358 students. But the purple, the light purple is charter enrollment from this district. And the dark purple is enrollment into other school districts from this district. So basically transfers to school districts such as Schertz-Cimolo, San Antonio, whatever. That was purple, the purple area transferring out has increased by almost 1,000. So in reality, since 2014, your district grew by about 1,300 students. But you didn't see that necessarily. So let's talk about some of those expansions really quick. I don't want to dwell on, you can ask any question later if you want. But Compass Rose, which is the one I mentioned in Brooks, they expanded this year, they almost tripled in size. So they have a new building. They went from last year with 369 students to 844 this year. They estimate about almost 10% last year came from East Central. So we have to assume that new population, which was upper grades, that they may be coming about the same percentage. Idea Commerce, I'll be honest, they would not talk to us. We even put in a public information request, and they wouldn't answer their phone down in the county. So I don't actually know how many students are living in East Central that go to Idea Commerce, but based on the other Idea schools, it's probably somewhere between 5 and 10%, just because of where it's located geographically. And you don't have as many students living up in that area. They're probably mostly coming from the Converse area. But that school will have 1,500 students once it's at full capacity. So that will matter. You could have 100 or so students coming from Idea Converse. Next year, 2 new charter systems were granted charters a couple of years ago. Royal Public Schools and Prelude. But their first schools are planned in the South Side School District. We think it could maybe slightly affect you, but most likely not. Depends on where they place them. We don't know where they're going to be. Looking at the economy, let's switch gears just a little bit here. We, of course, took a huge hit back in the spring. San Antonio Metro lost about 120,000 jobs. Half of them have been recovered for the most part. I haven't checked the latest numbers, but basically, let's say half. And that chart shows you how, for many years, the whole metro area had been gaining every single month, up until February. But look at that, the recovery is already happening. It's just going to take a little time to get those jobs back. Everyone knows it now. This is going to be a slower recovery, but it is happening. But I don't want you to forget that before March, job growth had been, when you average out the last 2 years, almost 2,000 new jobs in the whole metro area every single month. So it's robust. And in fact, a record 10,000 jobs were created in October of 2019. The metro area had never seen that many jobs in 1 month. So you can't forget that that was happening right before all of this. So the entire region is growing, and that's of course why you're seeing your growth happening now. Most of the recoveries since March and April had happened before September, or actually before June. It had happened almost immediately. Ever since June, there's really only been a few thousand new jobs added. It's just because of the closures that happened, and then the pandemic's just going to take a while to work itself out. But it's happening. But while we're talking about all this, other part of the equation that's really complicating things are all these low mortgage rates. And so back in April, we didn't know what to think. No one was buying homes for 2 months, but that changed overnight once these mortgage rates really started dropping. And so late summer home purchasing just exploded everywhere. We work with some districts that were about 30 to 45% more homes built than projected. And it all happened after May. It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. So this is what we have to consider now. Will that continue happening at that same rate? Probably not. This could be a blip with the low mortgages and kind of a little pent-up demand. But nevertheless, the growth isn't going to stop anytime soon. And we're not projecting any sort of recession anytime soon that I know of. But if something like that were to happen, like that happened back in 2007, 2009, you'll be hit. And we'll talk about a lower growth scenario later on. But of course, there are a couple of really big job centers happening right here in the backyard, just north of China Road. Have to talk about them real quick. The HEB Super Regional Warehouse opened 700 jobs. A lot of them came from other areas in the metro, but a lot of them are new, about half. The thing is, HEB owns a lot more land. So they're gonna keep putting buildings and manufacturing, most likely, on this site right off Foster Road, just outside the district. So that's something that I honestly don't know much about. Maybe they don't even know what they're gonna ultimately put at this site, probably not. But it's going to continue generating jobs as they build new pieces of their super regional centers, whatever they want to call them. But then we know recently that there's been an almost 4 million square foot fulfillment center plan. This exact same square footage, by the way, as the one in Pflugerville that's now an Amazon fulfillment center with 1,000 new jobs coming online there up in the Austin area. So if that does become Amazon, that's another job generator, right? That same area on Foster Road. That's actually in your district. So according to the San Antonio Business Journal, that construction could be finished by 2022. Something to look forward to, something to think about. That's a little bit of a manufacturing hub that's forming right in your district. And then of course, Brooks, we can't forget about it. This company, Oaken, I really don't know much about it, to be honest. I bet the commissioner does. 1,400 new jobs. I think part of them have already moved in to some buildings. There you go. So 1,400 jobs. They're a business service provider, I believe. They're from Europe. These kind of announcements they're great for the area. And all that means is more and more people need to live closer to these job centers, which are essentially right on the border of your district. So when we see trends like this happening, that's not going to shy us away from projecting new homes in the future. Let's put it that way. So the bulk of this presentation will deal with housing now. And what I want to tell you is we prepared detailed maps of the district. I'm not sure where Matt put them, but you'll have them. They're very large. The superintendent already has one. They really outline every piece of land in your district. There's a lot of information on these maps. So when you get home, feel free to look at them. Everyone usually loves them, post them up. But it will outline all these developments we're talking about in detail. We think of every housing development, but we also can't forget about limitations to development. And so think of land that you won't be able to build on. So we factor all of that into our long-range plan as well. And we look forward 10 years. We look at all of apartments. We look at land that has no plan. We can't just stop projecting just because we don't know what's going to be coming up the horizon. We have to assume you're going to have more growth than what you know of today, because the developers will run out of lots. Just because it hasn't been platted or filed with the cities or the county doesn't mean you're not going to have other growth after that. So that's something we really specialize in. We talk with land brokers and developers on where their next moves are going to be. Because trust me, they already know what they're about to buy, even though they may not break ground on it for 2 to 4 to 5 years. So what we do is we break up the district into what we call planning units. everything in your report is based on this planning unit configuration. And these planning units aren't arbitrary. They actually follow your attendance boundaries as well. So for your elementary and middle school attendance boundaries, you can actually add some of these together and create an attendance boundary. So these planning units contain housing projections and enrollment projections by grade level, by year, for the 10-year period. And that's how we can help you facilitate long-range planning. We can piece these together and say, okay, you need a new school here. I'm gonna let Stacy talk about all that later on. Well, we kind of start out our housing analysis with a look at who controls them. These cities control development, and each one has different rules and regulations. Some have none. Some have very strict regulations, like we've already heard about with the St. Hedwig land use regulation zoning. San Antonio is the bulk in orange. Their ETJ is in light orange. It's really the bulk of your district. But cities such as China Grove and St. Hedwig limit lot sizes. St. Hedwig dramatically, and they're a big chunk of your district. Now, the interesting thing, St. Hedwig's ETJ, they really can't control it. They have no control on it. That little strip of green you see there, running down Abbott Road, those plats go to Bexar County to get approved. So they do not get approved to be a St. Hedwig or be a San Antonio. And guess what? That little strip of land right there is a hot spot right now for new development. So these kind of things all affect our projections. Church requires larger lots. We take a look at your CAD data from Bexar. And so all these little parcels, this is your parcel map essentially. And that's all outlined in detail on your big maps. The blue are what we call owner changes. They may have not necessarily changed owner, but the name changed in the CAD. Typically, it indicates an actual ownership change. In some cases, like Morales land, they just changed the name in the appraisals. But I can point out a few developments in there that actually did change names. And this helps us identify where land transactions are being made. The brown tracts are for sale. There are actually there's more land for sale. It's just not listed in national databases. So we've had to kind of figure out where that is as well. But that's coming from our national vendor code. This is great map. So this map shows you in blue the existing and active single-family neighborhoods. You can see a lot of them are focused around I-10, around 410, and down 37. The orange neighborhoods are planned or areas, land tracts, we think have potential for development based on our interviews. Those purple tracts, I love that. I love to see more purple. That's where you can't build them. So it's government owned, utilities own those lakes, so those are great areas. There's even an industrial landfill site, right? So we know nothing's going to be built there. So we're not going to project new homes in those areas. And we've also included floodplain on here just to show you that we think about that too. You do have some very, very wide floodplains in this district, especially up there closer toward I-10. So we think about all of these things. We also consider how infrastructure is relating to development, because without roads, without water, you're not going to have houses. So of course, we know I-10 is being expanded. That's all good, but the more important thing is, are these homes going to be able to get water, wastewater? And so one of the most important projects is this new wastewater line coming in near us here. And so that oversized lift station, there's a lift station built for 5,000 homes, or it's going to be. It's more than the Gates tract requires. What does that tell me? It tells me that somewhere in this area, there could be more homes. So if SAWS is building overcapacity infrastructure, anticipate over the years more housing developers piggybacking off of that. We have to talk about the Vista Ridge pipeline, I think, because I think it's a huge thing for this entire city, not just East Central, but everywhere. You're adding in 1.6 billion gallons of water annually to San Antonio, a city that used to be kind of water starved is now water rich. water coming from the Brazos Valley aquifers out to LeBron College Station. It's now coming in through a pipeline into San Antonio. So to me, the water worries that we had maybe 15, 20 years ago just aren't here as much anymore. We're still thinking about them, but we have a lot more water to build. This is a very good graph. We're going to get into now actual numbers for housing. We've split it up here, going back 2010 to 2019. Those purple bars are your actual housing starts according to the Bexar County Appraisal District in this district. So for a long time, you had really under 500 homes a year built here. Starting in 2017, that all changed, closer to 600, closer to 800 in 2018. These are housing starts. 2019, almost 1,000. Well, we don't forecast for housing starts, so we're shifting gears just a little bit. We forecast for occupancies, when people are actually going to move in. We actually have someone that goes out to these neighborhoods. He actually went out to every neighborhood in your district, figured out how many homes were under construction, available for move-in, and how many lots were left to build out. So basically, we were able to figure out an occupancy count for each neighborhood, a live count for when we got the student data. Looking forward, for the next couple of years, single-family housing, we're anticipating this to continue to creep up with all these new developments coming in. Within 4 or 5 years, we could see over 2,000 housing occupancies. Now, we take a conservative approach. We don't want you to overbuild. And so we have kind of leveled it out in the applicants. We haven't stopped the development. But we also know there are a lot of other areas in this metro area that still have a lot of land left. Places like Medina Valley ISD, which is also, we can't forget about that. And so we haven't continued that line up. But as we continue to work with you, sure, maybe we can adjust that. And maybe we do realize there's more development later on. But we don't want to tell you today that you're going to need 12 elementary schools when you probably don't. So we'll take a conservative approach. When a developer tells us they're going to put in 400 homes a year, depending on who it is, I'm either going to believe them or I'm not going to believe them. They always inflate their housing numbers, almost every single one of them. So I think that's a very telling line. It shows you the history and it shows you where you're headed. So all this is showing you, all I want to really get across with this table, there's a lot of numbers here, and there's even more numbers in your report. But what I really want to get across is these 20 developments. In some cases, they're not even a development yet. They're just a piece of land that we think we know is for sale, we think it has potential for development, or we know it has. What we've done here is shown you kind of a 5-year projection, last 5 years of housing projection, 2025 to 2030, and then the total, and they're all going from top to bottom. The most impactful development in the district, which is South to Meadows, Paloma, the future ranch at Armendorf. Those are your big players, right? These 20 developments or land tracts will account for 2/3 of all the new housing in the school district for the next 5 years, and 60% of the new housing in the entire 10-year period. So these 20 are the ones to watch. And there's a lot of others. You have over 85 developments that will be projected for in this district. That's a lot.
My fault.
Sorry about that. So, looking 1 year out, this is just 1 year. By planning unit, it's a hotspot map showing you how many homes, and it also includes apartments, but you don't have any that will be occupied next year. Basically, how many homes will be occupied by planning unit by October 2021. And again, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, we forecast for the snapshot date every school year. You're unfamiliar with it, snapshot occurs the last week of October. It's essentially what the TEA says your official enrollment is on that date. So that's when our forecasting is for every single week. The growth in the next year is very, very concentrated in the north. Of course, you know all these new developments happening up there, such as Knox Ridge, Notting Hill, and Converse, with these new ones popping up on Abbott. Cobalt Canyon, there's about 5 little developments that all are developing at the same time. And then it's a little more spread out in the south part of the district, which is a good thing. If you get the development spread out, that means it's a different attendance. I always say it's a good thing. So you can see here, all your usual players, Republic Creek, Heritage Oaks, and the South End Meadows of Cove down in the south. That's where next year's is focused. The better map is the next one. Oh, sorry, it's not a map yet. But I mentioned these areas in the north. The Arcadian, that's the apartment complex. It's a San Antonio Housing Authority complex that they funded, being built by NHP over there. It's on the east side of 1604. Sorry, it's on the west side of 1604, north of I-10. It has broken ground. You probably can't see it yet. There's a little hill right off 1604, but it's 324 units. More important thing is it has 55% 3 and 4 bedrooms. That's not a normal apartment complex. So you're going to have a higher student count emanating from that. But we're not expecting those occupancies to occur until October 2022. The 37 181 corridor, that's another hot spot. But like I said, it's spread out a little more. But some of these upcoming developments, we've already talked about the Gates Tract, right off 87 at Beck. That's near Heritage. That'll be coming up in the next couple of years. You'll start seeing that breakdown on that. I've been told maybe within 18 to 24 months, you can start seeing homes. Ranch at Elmendorf, I think it's a really big player for your district. When it actually gets started is a little bit of a question mark right now. D.R. Horton, they kind of put the brakes on it. TxDOT kind of wanted them to start working on some turn lanes. It's going to get a little expensive for them. They're going to have to negotiate that with the state. I've been told they're actually already looking at more investors to get going on it. I've never seen a project like of this size stall because of turn lanes with TxDOT. Usually it's worked out. So unless it's a bigger issue than I've been told, the city of Elmendorf has already put forward a lot of utility infrastructure they're building now. It's supposed to be ready by mid-year 2021. So I would anticipate this getting started. It might be delayed, but once it gets started, it'll probably get started quite rapidly. D.R. Horton does not mess around if they truly are the ultimate buyer of the tract. Between Foster Road and Loop 410, I think this is a hot spot we really have to watch. Nothing's happening, it's all fields. But we know that Mosaic, which is Yantis, basically just purchased land very fresh. It wasn't even in our original CAD data, it's been updated very recently. For a 1,300 lot community, they've been looking for builders ready to play, right off of SS1. It's on the east side of 410. And of course the Borealis tract, which don't know when exactly that'll get started as well, but when it does, it will be a big player right off 410 at over 1,800 acres. So we've not projected in the near term for that to develop, but we do have to kind of assume it will at some point start. So looking out 5 years, we've added a little more to this map, but the hot spots that I mentioned are still there. I think that's the good news for you guys. There really are. There is a focus area of growth happening that we're noticing in these 3 areas. But moving from south to north, those neighborhoods over there, South and Meadows and South and Cove, they're really going to take off. And we can't forget about some of these other ones as well. Homewood Place down in Elmendorf as well, Roush Coleman. But moving north is really, really where a lot of the new home development is going to take off quickly. Paloma, it's right now your largest development in terms of growth. But next to it, of course, we've got Savannah Place, which is LGI. They're known for rapid growth. I think someone's jamming out. There are a lot of landowners along Abbott Road 1518. And there's a road, I believe it's called Frudenberg. Is that correct? Okay. That road has some land available, already owned by Harry Hausman. There's another gentleman, Mr. Elizondo. I've been told basically that's all going to. And it's basically next to nothing. So we have projected for a lot of that land to develop in the projection period. It's becoming an emerging area greater than we see it as today. So moving forward, 10 years at this 10-year hotspot now of new housing. This is to me the more important one. It's looking out into the future beyond what we really see today. There's about 600 acres. They're owned by Real and Apps on the west side of 1604, just south of I-10, for sale. I've been told it even was under contract. I have very limited information as to who actually has been interested in that or who may be purchasing it. Maybe something has changed in the last month or so, but I haven't heard. Lennar's also purchased some extra land along Abbott for 175 more homes farther south from those new neighborhoods today. And of course, Hunter's Ridge, which is the area housing, 1,000 lots. That's planned. They already have a development plan in the city of San Antonio. Gates Tract, that's another hotspot, over 1,300 lots planned over time. Not all of it will develop in this 10-year period. I don't think that one's going to be as quick to develop such as neighborhoods like Lennar. But another one to watch is right here, very close by where we're at today. The gentleman named Reynoso owns some acreage. Look for that to develop. It could be over 1,000, maybe 800 to 1,000 lots. It's Gardner Road and new solar streets. D.R. Horton, 3,400 lots. Definitely something to watch whenever that actually gets kickstarted. And then those I already mentioned there, off to the west, Mosaic, Morales, Tract. That's a long-term development project there with commercial and everything. But then there are a lot of others. Remember I mentioned there are 80 developments in this district. So we can't go over all of them. But the majority of the growth is going to be single-family housing for the next 10 years. It always starts out that way. So 21,000 new housing units are projected in your district over the next 10 years, 21,000. And some of those will be apartments as well, over 2,000. We know the one happening currently, the Arcadian up there on 1604. But then there will be a few others. There are some other tracts that are zoned multifamily in San Antonio already. Now, once we have tabulated all this, we have to connect it with your student data. And so what we've done is we've mapped all of your students to almost 100% accuracy to the house. And so when we get that, we're able to essentially figure out how many students live in every neighborhood. And we can develop what we call a student ratio, students per home. And that helps us project new student growth in neighborhoods. Every neighborhood's a little different. Some have more students, maybe they're closer to a school. Maybe the price point is just right for families and children. Maybe they just built more homes with 3 and 4 and 5 bedrooms. And so every single neighborhood is different. But when we gather this information, it helps us understand how to project for these homes that aren't even on the ground. In your district, the number of students per single family home is 0.44. I'll tell you, it's probably a little bit higher than that if you add in those 400 to 500 COVID students that move on. So I'd say it's probably about 0.47, something like that. It's a little lower than most suburban school districts. Most are between 0.5 to 0.65, usually closer to 0.6. Multifamily, 0.26, that will go up once you get that one apartment that's being built right now. But that's about average. One reason I believe the single family ratio is lower is because of all the charter schools. If you add back in those 1,300 students, you would have a ratio likely over 0.5. Now, this chart, all it's doing is showing you growth from 2019 to 2020, which there really was none. You had actually negative growth because of COVID. But We divided it by subdivisions that were existing, built out, the blue line, actively building subdivisions, and apartments, and manufactured housing, parks as well. But the line to look at is that green line, actively building neighborhoods actually gained. So even though you lost all these students, you gained students in those active communities, just about 100. So the growth continues even with COVID. So we have to consider that as well. Now, again, I mentioned we project for the PED snapshot date in October. You don't want to start with day one because not everyone shows up on day one. We have 3 scenarios of growth. We tell you to use our moderate scenario, but we also provide for the district a low and a high. We don't provide that by neighborhood or campus. It's just too many variables that could change and alter that. It's impossible to project that. But the moderate is what we use for all of our campus and grade level projections moving forward. It's the most likely to occur. So before I get into that, this is unusual. There are a lot of really strange factors, especially with these people today, that we have to take into consideration. This is very rare to have a long list like this. But let's look at some of these. What we've considered, and a lot of these are just really for the next year or two to consider. COVID, of course, when is that rebound going to happen? We've assumed a lot of it, maybe 60 to 80% of it will happen next school year. Maybe you're already seeing it. Pre-kindergarten was added to all campuses very, very recently. That's affecting enrollment today. Home starts have doubled in 2 or 3 years. So that's just very unusual to start a project for our first year and we see that happen. The historically low mortgage rates is another anomaly for this time. Low student counts. We believe that some of these ratios of students at home are going to increase. One of the problems is along I-10, you don't have schools. So people maybe aren't moving in with school-aged children yet. We see this happen all the time. Whenever a school is far away, maybe they're moving in and they're a newlywed that doesn't have children. Maybe they have a 1-year-old and they're just not thinking about sending their kid to school yet. They just saw a nice house they like. We anticipate those ratios to go up over time, especially if you get a school built closer to some of these neighborhoods. Then it's really going to accelerate. So these are things we've considered, and as we move in time, we've assumed the ratio of students to home will increase. This apartment moving in up there north of I-10 with over 55% 3 and 4 bedrooms. That's unusual. So we know that's going to have a higher student count than a more typical apartment. The Cassidy High School just opened, they're expanding. We've considered that, we've factored that into the high school projections. So not every new high school student is going to be thrown into the central high. These new charter school campuses, a lot of new charter school campuses right on the border of the district, all in just a matter of 1 or 2 years. We have others that are expanding, but also these additional charters. So a lot to consider and factor in. It's not super simple and it's not straightforward, unfortunately, this year, but we're trying our best. So that moderate growth scenario, I want to go over the first 3 years here. We start today with fewer than 10,000 students, or heck, maybe you actually reached that number today since we received your student data. What we're anticipating is that COVID rebound. The majority of the growth in 2021 forecast here is from the COVID rebound. If roughly 2/3, 3/4 come back or enroll as kindergarten or first graders, we could see upwards of 500, because don't forget, it's not just the students we lost, it's the students that we're projecting to move in as well. It's kind of a double whammy. We have some districts that lost 1,000 students, but they were projected to gain 2,000. That means they actually lost 3,000. So you can't forget the students who aren't here yet or who are projected to move in the next 12 months. They're going to add to that total. 2022 and 2023 are also higher than they should be for one reason. The apartment that I've spoken about already, with those high bedroom units. So that is really, those 2 factors are kind of driving, or 3 factors, are driving the first few years of growth. Once 2022 hits, 2023, most likely COVID will be a thing of the past. I mean, it'll still be around, but we won't be talking about it like we are today. That's when your growth could really accelerate, because now all these new developments moving in, the single-family developments, are going to start causing student growth. And so when you look out 10 years, yes, you could be approaching upwards of 1,000 new students a year. Now, that's really, really dependent on what all these charter systems do. So let me really quickly focus here. That low growth scenario there, let's look out 10 years, 17,000 students. It sounds like a lot because you're only at about 10 now. But if you do continue to see higher rates of charter growth, and especially if they move closer to be central, maybe we're going to be looking at 2,000 or 3,000 students less. If we continue to see 200, 300 students a year removed from this school system going to charters, expect a lower growth. I mean, it's just certain. A higher growth of closer to 19,000, that could mean we really have to accelerate these projections and more families start moving in to these neighborhoods. As you build new schools, maybe these developments we think are gonna happen actually do more than we really thought to begin with. We'd be looking at a higher growth scenario. So we want you to follow that moderate growth scenario. You can see the first 5 years, it's not a lot. Yes, 12,500 looks like a lot. But with a lot of these things we talked about, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. As long as your system continues to be successful and fewer charter schools are built, I believe the moderate growth scenario will occur. We also assume there will continue to be charter. We can't just assume it's going to stop. The driver is really all the new housing. So with that, I'll have Stacy come up. She'll really focus in on the schools and how all this relates to them.
Let's take a quick 5-minute break.
Good to see you, sir. Definitely, sir. Thank you. Thank you, definitely, I sure will.
Yeah, I think this district's a little more complicated than most, to be honest. It could be, we don't like to.
It's gonna be always supposed to be.
Thank you, sir. Everybody ready? Quick break.
Okay, you have been very bureaucratic. You've put a lot of instructions back and forth. So all of the information that you have has been, as you mentioned, put together into our assessment model of how many students we project to live in each of those planned units each year for the next 10 years. So those numbers that district-wide are helpful for the budget people and the principals that want to know how many kids are going to be showing up at the door, need to know where the kids are projected to, and this is that school. So this is another key now, like you've seen before, this represents how many students are projected to gain. So it's not dividing the teachers about the same, in the same spot. You know, you've got the area up around I-10, Notting Hill, and Knox Ridge on the west side of 1604. That's the plus 264 gain that includes the Arcadian apartment. And Paloma and Savannah Place and Milligan Grove on the east side, south of I-10. Along Abbott's Road, that's the Hunter's Ridge, along 1R, that's the plus 309, several developments along Abbott Road. Down in the south, the plus 202 is up branching out north of North Horton. And of course, that is a conservative estimate because we don't know really any of these. And I should really reiterate that. Justin mentioned this, but it's really our obligation as a consultant for the school district to provide you with a conservative projection, because it would be irresponsible for us to, first of all, believe everything we hear, as Justin mentioned, but secondly, to advise you that too many students are going to show up, because that would cause you to make financially irresponsible decisions about new schools. So we take a very conservative approach to these projections. So my point in showing you this heat map is to show you that it's spread out throughout the district, but of course the focus is in the north and certainly in the short term. So how does this relate to the school attendance zones? The same information about how many students are projected to be gained has been aggregated into the attendance zones. So of course, not surprisingly, the traditional elementary attendance zone is everything north of 87, and we are projecting almost 1,500 new students to live in that blue area that is currently the attendance zone for tradition. So you're building 800, 900 student elementary schools. That's almost 2 full schools worth of students projected to be added in 2 years. Right? We see growth throughout the rest of the district as well, but another focus is at Harmony. Second runner-up, or first runner-up, I guess, is Harmony, with gaining almost 1,000 students. That's over 1 full school in the next 10 years. So how does this look compared to, or when is this going to happen? When are these schools going to fill up? If we look at this chart, these are, let me start with saying, I showed you before the attendance zones, and that projected growth was the number of resident students projected to be added to each of those attendance zones. But because of the magnet program at Slaughter, so many students transfer out of those resident attendance zones currently in order to attend Salado. So we have made the assumption that the enrollment at Salado will continue stably at about 700 students as it is now over the next 10 years. And the same proportion of students will transfer out of each of the traditional or zoned schools in the same proportions as they do today. So if we take resident students projected to live in tradition minus the students, the portion of students that are transferring out today, you see that by about 2023, tradition is projected to have almost 1,200 students enrolled. And the yellow bars represent the year in which each of these schools is projected to reach 120% capacity. And that's just a threshold that we use internally and with our clients. Because the decision of when to build a school is locally dependent on your local criteria. But from our experience, in order to give you a ballpark idea, at 120% capacity, you just can't add another T building. You just can't feed that many kids lunch without starting lunch at 10 o'clock in the morning and going until 2:30. And so, so we use 120% as a threshold for when you need to have another school open to relieve the overcrowding. So, under all of these assumptions, 120% capacity and assuming that Salado will continue pulling students in a similar capacity. In about 2023, tradition is going to need some overcrowding relief. And then the next step, I'll give you a preview, is going to be in about 26 or 27 when Harmony and Highland Forest and Oak Crest are all projected to reach that threshold, right? So now I'm going to walk you through each of those steps. The first step, of course, is tradition in the north. Let me begin this by saying, these are not attendance zones. These maps that I'm showing you are not attendance zones because you, the board, have not made any decisions about where you're going to locate schools and certainly no decisions about who's going to attend those schools. So in case anyone from the press is here or this is publicized, these are not attendance zones, wherever the camera is. I will speak right to the camera. Nobody's made any decisions about where the schools will be located, when they will open, or who will attend those schools. However, for me to tell you when a school is going to be needed and going to run out of space, I need to draw a catchment area around where that school might be located to tell you that's counts. This is where enough students are going to live to fill a school, but not overcrowd it too much. Okay, so with that being said, these catchment areas illustrate areas where you might build a new school to open in fall of 23 in order to relieve tradition's overcrowding. So this map shows that somewhere north of 87 and west of 1604, you could locate an elementary school. This would have enough residents living there to support a school and to provide enough relief to tradition for a while. I have drawn this catchment area like this because the district owns a site at the intersection of 1604 and 1346 that could potentially be used for this purpose. However, there is, okay, so with that being said, I don't think this pointer will work, but you guys see where tradition is if you just go west along that 1346 to the intersection of 1604. That's where the site is that you own. If a school were to be built here, it would provide enough relief for tradition to hold until about 28, from about 23 until about 28, okay? Alternatively, that site is right there at the intersection of two major highways. It may or may not be an ideal site for an elementary. It might be better used for other things. So should you decide that a site in the far north would be possible instead, you could site a school somewhere as an option too. Instead of the site we just talked about, a site further north, either north or south of I-10, somewhere around that intersection with 1604. We have found that most high-growth suburban school districts that we work with prefer to site elementary schools within or near a residential development. That's kind of the norm, particularly in the Houston and Dallas and Austin region districts that we work with. And the school districts develop a good relationship with developers because it's beneficial to developers to provide you with a school site at a reasonable cost because it helps them sell houses, of course. And just an alluded to this earlier, that should you decide to site an elementary school in the far north, somewhere in this orangish catchment area, we can feel pretty certain that these projections will need to be accelerated, because the appeal of having a school nearby is going to sell houses to young families with children to a greater extent than if those families have to drive down to Tradition. Should you decide to open an elementary in this catchment area rather than in the first option I showed you, this will also support enough students and provide enough relief for Tradition to last until about 28. So there is no financial or temporal reason to site the school in one location versus the other. You're still going to need another school in the north, that I'll tell you about in a minute, in 28, either way, regardless of where you choose. So the second step, we're going to now shift to the south. Remember I told you in about 2026, Harmony and Highland Forest were both going to exceed that threshold of 120%. So in the yellow area that you see marked as 2026, new elementary in 2026, could be a site for another elementary in order to relieve both Harmony and Highland Forest. The district, as you know, owns a large parcel of land in that yellow area along the I-37 corridor. And part of that could be used as an elementary. But again, as I mentioned earlier, should you decide to use that parcel of land for something else, then an elementary site could be sited within a residential development. There are many down the Southlands, Southland Meadow and Coven Lake, as well as Blooming Trails is the one we were talking about just earlier. Right, there are lots of opportunities for new development within that yellow area in which an elementary site could be negotiated with the developer in a residential setting. So that would be needed in about 2026. Now we're going to go back up to the north, and again, with option one, if you choose the site to build the first elementary up here on the site that you own, then you're still going to need a second elementary on the east side of 1604 around I-10. And again, there's still lots of opportunities for good school sites to be acquired in that area. Likewise, if you choose to buy a site up there for the 23 school, you're still going to need another site up there for the 28 school. And the good opportunities for these two schools are basically on the northwest and the southeast corners of the quadrants of I-10 and 1604. I don't have this on a map, but I will mention that in the very end of this projection period, like 29 or 30, it's likely that you're going to need a school down in the far south, in and around the Ranch Delaware, depending on how that takes off, when it gets started, what it ends up materializing to be, if it's D.R. Horton, and what their plans are for price points and density and all of that. It could easily support a school down in the south part of Harmony at the end of this projection period. But we have not included that because so much is still unknown towards the very end of this projection period. So that fulfills our elementary portion. Let's move along to middle school. These are the middle school attendance zones. In the current legacy attendance zone, we're projecting to gain about 300 middle school students. And in the heritage zone, of course, almost 1,500 students, because this is where the majority of those red hot spots occurred, is within the heritage attendance zone. What does that look like as far as timing? If we stick with the 120% capacity threshold, then Heritage will exceed 1,600 students in the fall of about 2024, and that exceeds the 120% threshold. So if you know that Heritage can accommodate 1,450 students squeezed the year before, then we can say that we can open a school in 2024 to relieve Heritage. If you know that Heritage can squeeze even more and accommodate 1,600 students, then maybe we can postpone it another year. But again, this is just kind of a ballpark to help you with your long-term planning. So where might this be? The logical solution, of course, is north of 87 in the north of the district. There are 2 sites that the district owns in this area that are possibilities for middle school. One is next to Tradition Elementary, and one is the site we've been talking about at the intersection of 1436 and 64. All these numbers, you guys. And I'm a numbers person. So, again, that would be in fall of 24. So, at the high school level, we don't have any maps, of course, but this is an important time to talk about Cascade High School. The assumptions that we have made are that the COVID capacity restrictions that have been placed on the Cascade High School will be relieved next year. That you will be able to enroll more than 60 or so students as you have this year. And we've also assumed that every incoming 9th grade class will be larger than the previous 9th grade class, up to a maximum of about 120 to 150 per grade. And so those are the assumptions for the CAS lead, and therefore that many students are pulled out of the total for East Central High School. So this brings us to an important point, and that is, this is the time, this year and next year and the next year, that the district really needs to start thinking about what you as a community want as far as additional high school space. What do you want that capacity to look like? Because Cascade High School gives you the flexibility to postpone that decision a little bit. As you can see, if 120% threshold doesn't happen until the end of this projection period. And if East Central can squeeze 4,300 students in there, then you can wait until 2030 to have some kind of additional high school capacity. But the decision about what that capacity looks like is going to need to be a discussion to be had with the community over the next few years. Does that look like a second traditional high school? Or does that look like another specialty campus, kind of like CAS Lead or a STEM program or any number of other specialty high schools that don't have all of the extracurricular and don't have an attendance zone, so that they pull from the general population. But anyway, that is that's a discussion that can be initiated in the upcoming years to handle this projected overcrowding at the high school level. So in summary, what I've told you, for those of you thinking about finances and bond elections, this is a way to summarize it all. We are suggesting that by about fall of 23, the elementary school in the north, fall of 24, a middle school in the north, fall of 26, an elementary in the south, 28, the north, another elementary in the north, and by the end of the projection period, some kind of high school capacity in whatever form that takes. And so, you have been extremely patient, but we can both answer any questions at this point. That's a lot of work. Thank you for doing all that.
Appreciate it. Got a lot of decisions to start making.
Could you go back to the middle school projection for me? And back to the map.
That one or the next one?
See, that's the one catch, I think it was. There's another one with it, where they.
That one shows where middle school 3 might.
Okay.
So there's an awful lot of growth going on down there in the south, but you're not projecting a new school down in that area.
Well, no, because we've had growth in the north and growth in the south. And so we basically split up that growth and half of it's happening, it can still, Heritage can still handle the growth in the south, as long as you take away the growth in the north and send it to a different school.
Purple up there, close to I-10, we're talking about Heritage.
Yes, sir, that's north of 87.
North of 87.
Yes, sir, that whole purple area would be kind of a catchment zone, where perhaps we could locate a middle school. So we have the property on the Tradition site, and then we have 37 acres, I believe it, 1346 and 1518, right in 1604. So in that catchment area, there's 2 pieces of property that could accommodate a middle school.
Yeah, so I think we need to sit down and talk about the property that we already own and what our plans have been for that, and how it is impacted by this new study. And I appreciate you telling us how wonderful the developers are. We've not had that experience. We had an arrangement with the developer on the north side for enough property for middle school. And they realized that they could make more money out of houses. It just changed the whole agreement that we had with them, where we just finally said, forget it, we're done. That other agreement up there where somebody was going to give us some wonderful property in the floodplain.
Yeah. Oh, we see that
All the time, yeah.
See that all the time.
And it's also important that you establish a relationship at the proper point in their development cycle. So soon enough that the developers, you haven't platted everything, certainly, haven't really come up, they might have a general concept plan, but they haven't really formalized their plan. But also at a time when they might need the money, they might need a cash boost, right? Before they get started, when they've had quite an outlay for whatever their infrastructure costs are and so forth, their development costs.
I'll tell you this, one interesting thing about the growth or the developments in this district, they're not enormous. You may think, oh, 800, 900 lot development is really big because you've never really seen that until recently. To a developer, it's maybe not necessarily that huge. Taking a 20-acre, 30-acre parcel removes, several hundred homes from their pro forma. So those are the kind of things they're thinking too. A larger development, branch at Elmendorf, for instance, that's a perfect place to get in early. They would be happy to give you a school site. They're large, but yeah, you definitely want to stray away from looking at a 200, 300 lot development and taking away, a quarter of their homes. They won't like that. So that's something to think about too. It needs to be large enough so that they can still sell quite a few homes.
Okay, question, Bill? You still with us?
I hope no one fell asleep.
No,
Yes, a lot of work, a lot of information, appreciate all y'all done, it was very interesting. A lot of material here to dissect and interpret and look at, so appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, please, if you guys have any questions, let the superintendent ask us. Matt, we're glad to answer any questions that you may have. I know a lot of it's not you do, you've never seen it before.
Dale, do you have any questions? No? Thank you so much. Thank you. Good. You say. Wow. Yeah, we're gonna get busy. All right, we'll move on to the
Sir, trustees, in August, the board approved the 2021 employee compensation. In August, the board approved the 2021 employee compensation schedule. But within that, the board did note that a possible one-time retention supplement for staff could be provided mid-year if the funding was available. After reviewing our state funding as well as our 1920 audit of our financial records, we are confident that funding is available to pay a mid-year one-time retention supplement for staff in the amount of $510. We believe that $510 less the Medicare tax would ensure that the majority of the employees receiving that would receive a whole $500. So this would apply to staff members who meet the following criteria. The employee must have been employed in the district at the end of the year last year on May 29th and must still be employed with the district as of December 11th. They must also be a full-time employee or participate in the teacher retirement system. These criteria replace any previous criteria that was approved in 2021, as you recall. This is something similar to what the board had done previously. So the criteria that was aforementioned would replace that criteria. The $510 payment, less that Medicare tax, will be made to all eligible employees' bank accounts via direct deposit on December 21st. The cost to the district for this one-time retention supplement is approximately $610,000, including the applicable district fringe benefits that would be compared along with this. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time. So due to the timing of this, and the fact that we don't have check stock anymore, we were able to do checks last time because we still had check stock carried over from when we used to do printing of actual checks. So this would actually be, they would receive their check via the direct deposit that they would normally receive, and through that same vehicle on the 21st, they would receive a second check. It would be in the amount of what's left after the 510 minus Medicare, which would be about 500. So the check stock is really the issue there. We don't have the check stock anymore.
So how are we going to make that a personal thank you to them? I mean, putting something in somebody's checking account is wonderful. I love to have the money, but this is supposed to be, thanks for hanging in with us. Thanks for the work that you've done. We're sorry it couldn't be more. All of those kind of things. How do we make it more personal?
Yeah, so my plans were to host a Facebook Live with all employees and invite them to the announcement. And I would, and of course, any trustees could accompany me on that announcement, where we would certainly acknowledge, their contributions to the school district. And also, as you mentioned, that we were hopeful to have been able to do more, and not happy with the fact that we weren't able to approve a compensation increase for this year. And we're happy to announce that we're able to do this. And then on December 21st, they will be receiving their second check of the month, right as we broke for Christmas. In addition to that, I would be announcing for employees who are custodians, child nutrition workers, maintenance employees, grounds employees, and bus drivers and transportation employees, that those who qualify for the quarterly performance bonus would also receive in their December paycheck the $300 bonus. So the employees in those job groups could potentially have an additional $800 check right at Christmas. So it's not as nice as that tangible handed out, you get to talk to them face to face, but in announcing this possibility, the principal leadership staff, they were very appreciative and very encouraged about being able to announce it to their staff. So definitely not as good as face to face and handing that tangible paper check to them, but I think it's going to be well received in that manner as well. And, many of the trustees can certainly be present in that remote kind of environment as we make that announcement to staff. So that's my best thinking. open to any other thoughts or ideas?
Do a little certificate check, I mean, bogus check, at least.
I know they're getting their money, I mean, just something to hand, I mean, just something to hand to. So, maybe we could hold a $500 check on the other end of the camera and say, you're all getting one of these. We're in the process of electronically depositing this value. We're definitely open to anything we can do to really enrich it. We've got some creative folks over here.
Yeah, I was talking about that too, about the card, the check card or whatever, I don't know what that.
I mean, I just don't know how some of the staff is gonna be able to participate in those online meetings, right? I don't see a lot of our bus drivers doing that.
Thinking about that, HVAC, yes, sir, another option could be to just have a time slot, it could be a brief meeting where we tell everybody, you're gonna cease what you're doing and you're gonna have a staff meeting.
Yeah.
Where the announcement is made so that we can ensure that everybody's present.
Yeah.
You know, again, it could be a quick 10-minute or less announcement so we can stop work for a moment and pull something like that. That's a possibility.
It's gonna be, I mean, it'd be tough for the bus drivers, it'd be tough for the maintenance guys who are out doing things. You know, you've got, the janitorial staff that's working the day or in the evening, you know, you can certainly get those groups together. I know some of my bus drivers, you know, we can go back, you know, to the bus barn or anything. So, you know, I just worry about that group of our employees that, you know, may not touch an awful lot to begin with. And here's another point where we really want to show them what we feel, and we're not gonna be able to touch it.
What about if you just buy the Christmas cards like you're talking about, and we either have it printed on or put an insert that says, thank you so very much for your dedication and blah, 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 and check your bank account, there'll be a great surprise in there or something.
I don't know, there's not much time left. There's
There's some watching as we speak.
Yeah, so it's not gonna be a secret too much longer.
Some of us are spinning it right now.
And that's it, we don't want it to be a secret, we want it to be.
I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll put our arms around it and see how we can make sure we do our very best to make sure it's a dignified presentation and if we're including, to the extent possible, all employees that we receive it.
Yeah, I can always want to hear it after the Saturday, tell me about it, that's what works. That was
I'm pretty sure, that they appreciate it, I'm pretty sure maybe there's some other issues, holiday out and other issues, I've already given them those, and so they probably said the patients, wait to see what we do.
Yeah, a part of it, we need to staff it, I don't know what it is, but, you know, it just was just important that the money.
Yes, sir.
Well,
We'll make sure we have a presentation. Yes, sir. Anybody have any questions? Mr. President, I recommend board approval of the one-time retention payment as presented.
We have a recommendation from the superintendent to approve the one-time retention payment as presented. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Motion from Mr. James Mulkey, have a second from Mr. Steve Bryant. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Yeah, motion adjourned. We have a motion and a second. We are done. Yeah, you have it.
Matt, do you have a clip?